This session is completely tailored towards this award. So some aspects of what we would say will cross over, but not much. A lot of the information is very distinctive and related to this bursary. Sheila's going to share very shortly a slideshow, and the format will be that I will kind of go through some of the general commentary around the scheme, and then Áine will dive into a more in-depth picture of types of projects that have been successful from Create's point of view, which, you know, we kind of hold those up as the example of really good community engagement and participation working really well. So we're delighted she can be here today. And then we have allowed a good amount of time, almost 20 minutes, for your questions and answers. And how we'll deal with those is we will take them all together at the end and not as we go along. And we will put them in the chat. And Sheila will answer them as we go along. And then Áine and I will be able to address your questions after. Does that seem okay for everyone? Thumbs up if that's all right. Good. Okay, great. So Sheila, you might start sharing my screen there if you don't mind. Great. And we'll go straight into slide 2 there, because we know it's the Artists and Community Award Funding Clinic here. So why this award exists is to basically offer some funding for a deeply engaged process of an artist or artists working with communities. We had before an artist in the community scheme, but what we found was that we got a lot of really different applications into the stream, and it was very hard to judge one against the other. So one application might have been to support a musical society to engage a rehearsal pianist. And then on the other side, we were having people who wanted to run a project deeply engaging community and for a community. So what we decided to do was make a distinction between those two things. So this award is now purposely designed or redesigned to facilitate community engagement. That can mean in any art form. So it doesn't matter if it's dance or theatre or visual arts or many of those combined. And participation can be across any age group, in school, out of school. None of that essentially, you know, is excluded, as long as the case is made around the quality of the engagement between the artist and the particular community selected. So you might pop on to the next slide there, Sheila. Thank you. So this, as I said, gave you a brief picture, but this is part of a wider set of actions with which we support. So yesterday we had the individual artist bursary, and we're one of the few local authorities outside Dublin to have a specific artist bursary award scheme. We also offer artist coaching and mentoring. We have specific visual arts training. We have other grants and bursaries available through the Creative Ireland programme. So this is just one of the things that we do as an award scheme to cultivate community participation and support artists to do that. So I suppose, why do we have the scheme? So to create those opportunities, as I said, so artists and communities can connect, grow new ideas together, or develop something new, or to test something new, or to explore new ways of working in a community which maybe hasn't had much creativity before. And really, I suppose the power of this award scheme means that the artist is leading a process whereby the community in some way is central to the engagement or the purpose or the direction of the artwork and what form that takes. So we might go to the next slide, Sheila. So you can apply to this fund to use it for the full amount of the money that you need to do a project, or if you needed to add to other money that you have, investment from other grants or bursaries, or a personal investment, or investment from a school or community group, you can combine those and still apply for this award. What you can do is you can apply for the research of something that you'd like to carry out in the future. So something where you feel that there is a definite purpose and need in a community to do some creative work, or to you know, maybe to link people with place, but that maybe you don't know what form that can take. So you can apply to this award scheme to test and research and do a kind of a phase 1 of a project. Or if you have all that data and you're really confident and happy with the community of interest to go forward straight to production or realization, that can also be funded through an application through this scheme. The maximum we have available for any one award is €5,000. We won't be looking to carve those amounts up. So if you are applying, we will endeavour to try, if you're successful, to award the full amount, so that, you know, we're not asking you to reduce your budget or to change your context. If you get awarded the money, it will be a €5,000 bursary award. The bursary, as I said, for that 5,000, that doesn't mean that the overall budget for the project has to be 5,000. It could be 15,000, and you tell us, look, I have 10 from the Arts Council, or I have 5 from community development side, and I have 5 from, you know, and I'm looking for 5 for this scheme. So as I say, like, a whole range of funding sources can go in to form part of your budget for this application. So what's not eligible would be like fundraising projects, startup costs or deficits for new organisations, things like entertainment and hospitality, projects where, like, the majority of this activity is designated for communities within County Wicklow. So if all of your activity was happening outside County Wicklow, that wouldn't be applicable. But that said, if you have a project with a really strong links in Wicklow and a community wants to collaborate with another county or cross-border, supposing it was in dance and you wanted to network a group in Wicklow in with another community similar to them in Wexford, that's possible. It just, you couldn't propose a project that has no connection with Wicklow for this award scheme. We don't fund insurance costs or capital improvements. So, like, that means any technology, any building infrastructure, any of that's required. And we don't fund projects or programs where all of the costs are administrative or higher. So what we want to see is artists being paid for their time in carrying out this development work. Some of the expenses can go towards administration and venue hire, etc., but not all of them. If that's very clear. If not, I'm happy to take questions on budgets and funding when we get to the end of the session. So Sheila, maybe the next one. So often where people fall down coming through this award scheme, first thing I'll say is it's competitive. So that's always a difficulty. Sometimes you can have a really brilliant application and concept, you can articulate it well, and it's just literally that there's a vast amount of people applying, and it's very hard for a panel to make a distinction between one and another. But unfortunately, some decisions have to be made. But other things that can go wrong for applicants is lack of clarity around the budget. So just make sure that all your income totals all of the amount of expenditure when you sum it up. Your income can, like, there's a sample of where income can be from. It can be from sales, it can be from grant income. If you want to propose a project that's 15,000 and you're asking us for 5, but we don't know where the other 10 is coming from, that makes it really hard for a panel to award the money, because we don't know if €5,000 is awarded, do you have the 10,000 available? So if you're proposing a project that needs a greater amount than 5,000, just make sure you put in the supporting information for the budget about where the other money's coming from and if it's guaranteed or not. Sheila will show you there, she's totaled all the income. And then when you come along to the expenditure, you'll see that the total is the same, it's €6,000. And then we ask a particular question, what is the amount therefore you are asking Wicklow County Council to contribute? And just make sure you fill in that box and be really clear that, yes, my budget is 7,000, but I want 5,000 from the County Council within that 7. And there's a line for that within the application form process. At the end of the budget, it says how much are you applying to Wicklow County Council for. So make sure and insert that piece. One general bit of advice, just make sure that all your supporting information is together. If possible, that would be in one document. So rather than uploading 10 JPEGs and 5 CVs, if there's a way that you can reduce a file or compact a file so that one, like, all of those can be collated in one, it makes it much easier for a panel to review all the documentation. And it saves the download time here for us in downloading all the applications. The other thing is make sure that it's really that you answer all the questions. So and that you've read all the documentation carefully, so that you know what the questions are, that you answer all the questions, and that all the way through you frame the purpose for the project and the qualities of engagement that it's going to have. So basically, who you're going to interact with, how you're going to interact with them, how they'll benefit, and that all the way through the application text, you pull all of your argument back into the same place. So you're trying to demonstrate, here's my capacity, here's what I would like to do, here's the community's interest and activation in taking this project on with me, and this is what we're going to work on together. And so that every part of the application jigsaw you want to put together makes that argument very compelling and very together. It helps as well if you have a background and a track record in an area. Do ensure that you show us that through CVs or through biographies. If there's any partners that you've confirmed, you know, make sure you put those confirmations in as well. If you're working, say, in the context with children and young people, you will be required to be a lead in ensuring any colleagues you hire are adhering to child protection guidelines and policies. And it may be that we, as the council, will need to guard a vet you if you're successful in the award. So just to make that upfront. So again, just if you are working with children and young people, that's just something to take note of. And then I suppose the deadline is the deadline. There isn't any variation within that. That's the 27th of February at 4 o'clock. We can still take questions up until the day before that deadline. We don't receive applications directly, so please don't email your application to that address, only your questions. Please submit your application in through submit.com. If you're struggling with the submittable website, again, just email us at WAO there and we'll be able to provide assistance and guide you through that application process there if the system is glitchy or you're trying to navigate that. So I think that's all from me, and I'll hand over now to Áine, if that's okay. Just before I do, hear some of the additional artist supports coming up. We did mention them yesterday, but not everyone may have been on that call. So we've one-to-one coaching sessions, which artists apply to with really brief information, and we match you to a coach that we have developed a coaching panel, and we assign applicants to those coaches. It's free, and it's just a really short application question form, like a CV and answering 2 questions. So it's not very onerous, and it is free, and it's 3 sessions one-to-one. We have a national mentoring program for Words Ireland. So if you're a writer in any discipline, you can apply to that mentoring program. Again, participation is free. It's 100% sponsored and supported by ourselves. We have artist training and lifelong learning, peer discussion groups, seminars and talks. They all go out in our newsletter when and as they come up. We have supported a Wicklow artist salon, so it's artist led by artists in County Wicklow for artists in County Wicklow, and they're meeting once a quarter, usually in the Mermaid Arts Centre. And again, information on that will be in the newsletter. And also for the newsletter, we commission artists, that some are on our panel and others that we work with, to provide different perspectives on coping with change and discovering new things and resilience. So that's our kind of theme. And every month of the newsletter, a different artist is paid to develop a blog and contribute to that. So I think that's it. Sheila, is that my last hurrah there? Yeah, thank you. So please put the questions in the chat, and Áine is going to take over now. So I'll leave you in her capable hands.
Great. Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm just going to share my screen. So I know that not everybody likes to look at a presentation, but then other people love to look at a presentation. I suppose what I want to rely on here is a lot of visuals of the AIC scheme and projects that we've been connected with. So what I can suggest is that maybe if you want to slide the section of where you see the panel of people, you can slide that over, so you might be able to say spotlight me and you can see both if needed, if you don't want to look at the slides. But I think they're quite interesting because there's some really fantastic projects. But just to give you a sense of what I'm going to do today. I think there's a lovely bounce back, you know, in terms of what Jenny has highlighted there. I'm going to maybe look at some keywords or pick up on different areas, and even maybe cover some practical elements around applying for an award. We'll look at, you know, maybe I might dissect and demystify some language, because I think that can often be a little bit concerning or overwhelming for people. I'll touch off the principles of collaborative practice, so kind of beyond the workshopping model. And I'll use the AIC scheme as a framework to talk about engaging in collaborative, socially engaged projects. And it's similar to the Artists and Community Awards structure as well. So I think this is going to be really helpful. And we'll also touch on some tips on approaching an application, particularly how you might consider articulating, say, the purpose of the project, the process, but also the artistic outcome. Because I suppose when an artist is working in a collaborative space, working with artists or working with communities, and also working around an artistic output, quite often we're being asked to articulate quite a lot. So I'm going to move on. Just first of all, thank you so much to the team to invite me here today. And it's really lovely. There's some familiar names, but also so many names that I don't know. So it's lovely, always good. Just a little bit about me. I'm the Programme Manager for Arts and Engagement with Create. Just a tiny bit of background is that I suppose I started my career working as an artist in a community context. I would have worked down in Mayfield Community Arts Centre with a group of artists called CUIG. And I suppose over the years, I've worn many hats, which I think often a lot of us do. I had an individual arts practice that actually only ever happened kind of in my sketchbook. But I was a teacher, teaching free TAP credit courses. I was facilitating workshops that had a specific brief to an organisation's needs, which would have been working with communities. But I also had I suppose the amazing opportunities and moments of where I collaborated with communities, and that I suppose was a very different process of working. And then I moved into arts administration. So I suppose in ways I have a sense of sometimes when you're wearing all these hats, how over or how consuming or overwhelming it can be when you're in a community context, wondering what way am I working today? What hat am I wearing? But so I suppose maybe I think it might be good to just frame Create a little bit about what we do and who we are. So we're the National Development Agency for Collaborative Arts. I'm going to take it that no one has engaged with Create before, just so that everyone gets the, I suppose, same sense of the work we do. So we're a resource organisation for I suppose we provide advice and support services to both artists, organisations, and also communities who work collaboratively in both a community and I suppose in a social and community context. So these might be professional development opportunities like CPDs, project development, commissioning, they're also mentoring and project opportunities, but we're always also doing a lot of research within the work that we do. I suppose what you'll see about Create is that much of what we do is always in partnership with other organisations. So like the practice, we rarely work alone. Just because of time, I'm not going to go into our other programs, but here is a slide of our programs on our website. So I really, really recommend that people just have a look at the different programs that we're involved in, but also that we lead out on. And there's some great resources there. And here's also our strategy, if anybody's interested in looking at it, and kind of outlines, I suppose, our vision for the next, well, only 2 years now. And that's going very quick. I suppose also, I think it's important just to touch off that like there's several strands and opportunities and funding bodies that you can look at to support your collaborative practice. Or perhaps maybe your work fits more broadly under arts participation. And I suppose when we look at the Artists in the Community scheme, it is a unique scheme and award, I suppose, scheme in that it centres community at the heart of the artistic process, but also in the heart of the application process as co-authors from the very beginning out to the end. Before we go into the AIC, I'll just touch off some of the other funding places that you might look to. So there is the Arts Council Agility Award. I think it's a wonderful award if people are interested. It can be there for developing your practice, developing work or skills. There's also the Arts Council's arts participation, where they have both bursary awards and also project awards. And they would say that I suppose their practice would include collaborative practice, community and socially engaged arts practice. So it's much more open, say, than the AIC scheme. But also, as we know from local authorities, there's also Creative Ireland. But I think it's really important that people look at the various resource organisations in the country, from Arts and Disability Ireland to Age and Opportunity, Waterford Healing Arts Trust, and also ourselves, Create, because while not everyone would have an award scheme that they manage or offer, but they do have opportunities throughout the year, but they have incredible resources as well, and resources to artists. So as I said, I'm going to use the AIC scheme as a framework to talk through some of the language and principles of practice. So I'm not sure if people know, but we manage the artists in the community scheme on a devolved basis for the Arts Council. So the scheme supports artists to work with communities of interest and place, and the work happens in both rural and urban contexts around the country, in all corners, from islands to city centres to little villages. I think what's important, that when we say community, we mean it in the absolute broadest sense. I think community of place can be it's straightforward. People would recognise it as, you know, a community in Kerry, maybe Inishowen or Mayo or Wicklow, but also could just be a neighbourhood. But when it comes to community of interest, I think this can be a little bit confusing. You know, we've had communities who were divers, fishermen, beekeepers. There's been pigeon fanciers. There's been punks, fishermen. We've had artists work in health context, and we'll talk about one of those projects in a bit. We've had artists work with asylum seekers. So there's also, I suppose, when we say interest, it can be a topic that's bringing a group of people together. So it might be a community comes together because of their interest in climate issues, maybe addiction, aging, or migration, so on and so forth. Often the community could be coming together because of the project. So it might be a newly forming community. So I suppose we mean it in the broadest sense, but in our context, what we don't mean is a community of professional artists. I suppose also, I think it's important that, you know, that we break down the definition of collaborative practice, or the meaning, or what it means to people. So in our strategy, Create would say that collaborative arts involves artists and communities working together, often over extended periods, to make art. So there's an artistic outcome, and it's also durational. So it happens over long periods of time. And we'd also say that by facilitating wider participation, collaborative arts expand and diversify public engagement with the arts, enriching its contribution to society. So quite often the artistic encounter might have, I suppose, often is related to an issue of importance and significance to the community. We'd often say that collaborative arts contests notions of authorship. And we'd also, I suppose, a lot of the work that happens with groups happens outside the typical gallery space or the traditional theatre space. And it's also quite often many or more than one art form, or interdisciplinary, where more than one artist is collaborating on a project. We'd also say, I suppose, some of the core principles within the work is co-creation between the artists and the community. There's democratic decision-making. And I suppose we'd often say the projects are based on issues and themes that affect people in their everyday lives. Often projects engage people who might not normally engage in the arts, so that might be their first time. Often, I suppose, the projects allow a new narrative, so maybe a new way of articulating an issue that centres the community, possibly in more local, even national, or even global conversations. We'd often say that the project would have a purpose and meaning, or even a usability to the community, other than, I suppose, a series of art workshops where they might learn, where it's just about learning a skill. And that's really, I suppose, those workshops are really important too. And that's not, I suppose, this is what today is really important, that none of this practice is above the other. All of this is critical, but in the lens of, I suppose, particularly the artists in the community scheme, we would say this is very, I suppose, important. But also what's important is that there's an artistic output. So there's a publication, or perhaps it's a performance, or perhaps it's an exhibition, a film, anything. So we'll just go through maybe the AIC scheme. So an overview of the awards. So there's twice yearly the scheme offers awards. So there's 2 deadlines, and enables artists and communities to apply for funding to work together. It's open across art form. And I suppose I do think that the scheme offers a kind of a good sense of principles around collaborating with communities, and we'll touch off the objectives of the award in a bit, because I think they're useful. But I suppose ultimately the aim of the scheme is to encourage meaningful collaboration between the artists and the community. And most of these images actually are up on our website, as in this case studies of these projects up on our websites too. So the objectives and priorities of the AIC scheme. So I'm going to go through these with you today, because I think these we work, this is iterative. We always work to kind of make these clearer, or to support people to think through a potential project. These are in our guidelines, and I suggest that even, they might be useful even if you're applying to your local arts office for funding, because they're good. They're also great in terms of provocations for you to kind of think about the work differently. So we'd say that proposals should demonstrate a clear description of methodologies for engagement. So when we say methodologies, what we mean is this is your how, or your approach, your artistic approach to working with the community, how you're going to explore the concept or the focus of the work, or how you'll go about making. So proposals should value the contribution of all collaborators while providing opportunity for artistic challenge. They should support the inclusion of multiple voices in defining the identity and purpose of the project and making practical, artistic and conceptual decisions for the project. Ensure that the artistic quality, but also the quality of engagement between the artists and collaborators are considered at all stages. So that's in the planning, making, presentation and evaluation of the work. And then we've also got some questions in here for you to consider. You will need to consider the power differentials. Are there any ethical considerations that need to be included? And how do your methods reflect the values of the project and the collaboration proposed? So we'd also say that the proposals should demonstrate active support and commitment from all collaborators and partners, and organizational clarity, including a clear understanding of respective roles. And don't worry, in a bit I'm going to talk about where in the application we can center these things. And also that proposals should consider how the project might develop or encourage opportunity for the community, such as new communications or social networks or a new social or interest group. So in ways, what we're wondering here, will the project live beyond the current project timeline, and the use or the potential use or value of the project to the community beyond that timeline. So I'm not going to go into the details of this, but in the AIC guidelines, this is just a really simple illustration, and it's there just again as a provocation for people to consider in terms of maybe the different stages of a collaborative project, such as pre-production, production and post-production. And also I will be doing a specific artist in the community scheme information session, or myself or my colleague will be doing it in February. So we'll be announcing that next week. So all of this will be will expand upon everything, but I'm just conscious of time today. So we'll just go into the awards. So very like the Wicklow Arts and Community, we have a Research and Development Award, and similar that I suppose it was introduced to the scheme to offer the opportunity for artists to explore or test out an idea, but also to undertake the preliminary development of a project with a community. So it's the artist who applies for this award to collaborate artistically with the community, so to start testing out the project or the concept or the ideas. And then there's project realization, and the purpose of that award is to support proposals from the community or the lead organization. And so, but the artist is also involved in that application. I think what is really central is that in project realization applications, that it has to, I suppose, the community voice needs to be critical and really strong and evident in the application. So I suppose this is where we speak about consultation and ownership, that there's a real sense of the consultation process has taken place, and that the community do feel that, as in the actual people who will be collaborating with the artist, have shaped this with the artist. So I suppose to break that down, quite often we get a sense of an organization's voice where the community hasn't really shaped it. So we've different award amounts, and great news is that the AIC scheme, as of this year, the R&D awards have an additional €1,000. So I'm really thrilled to be able to say that. So we have a regular R&D award, where there's no mentoring, and that's for 3,500, and that can take up to 6 months. It could happen in a week, it could happen in 2 weeks, it could happen once a week, whatever way you and the community feel that is feasible. But also an artist can apply for 4,000 or for an R&D with mentoring, where the €1,000, so it's 4,500 and €1,000 of that is for the mentorship. And the mentor must be a professional artist. And then the recent graduate, this has been changed this year. So the recent graduate can apply for the regular R&D with mentoring, but they can also apply for an additional, up to additional €1,000 of funding. So this is for, I suppose, additional needs that they may have as a recent graduate. So perhaps there's additional expertise that they bring in that aren't just professional artists. So for argument's sake, if there was a recent graduate working in a healthcare setting, might they want to work with a specific expert in the field of whichever field in the healthcare setting that they're working with, or if someone's working in community development, would they like a community development worker to support them on in their thinking? And then there's the Project Realisation Award, which is up to 12 months, and the projects are a value of €15,000. I highly recommend that people always go for the full amount. I think quite often artists underestimate the amount of time that they do put into the project. So I know we speak to durational and long-term projects. If this was our money and we had a load of these project values, would be much higher. But I suppose the money can't be sniffed at either. And it's a developmental scheme, so that's always to be remembered. I think what's important to point out too is what a project realisation award is not. So the scheme wouldn't support a project where community, or so where an applicant has an idea but needs to populate it with community members. So that's what's, I suppose, that is often something that causes projects to not be successful, is that it's a really great idea, but really it's an artist's idea, and they're looking for participants to populate the project as opposed to those who will collaborate in shaping and designing it from the beginning. So I'm going to go into a few tips here for you to consider. I'm going to break it down into artistic process, which will include, say, the purpose of the award. So we'll look at maybe how to communicate your collaborative practice. And we touched off, like, say, methodology and the relational, what does that mean? We'll also look at the purpose. So, you know, if it's addressing social issues and that. And also we'll look at the artistic outcome. So how you describe this in your application, because I think sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. How do we do all this? The first thing that you should do, obviously, is read your guidelines, but it's really important, really, really important that you read the guidelines and first figure out, is this for me? Don't try and fit your practice into an application or application. I know what it's like to write them. It's heartbreaking. And if you've done all that hard work and it's not even eligible. The second thing that I just want to forefront here is that the criteria for assessment. The panel will review your application based on the criteria that's set out in the guidelines specific to the award. So you need to be clear as to what they are, because this is your guide as well as the panel's guide. So for example, in the Artist in the Community scheme, we have artistic merit, meeting the objectives and priorities of the award, and feasibility. In our applications, we expand upon those. So you will start to sense where in my application can I show the artistic merit of the proposal or the feasibility. And all application guidelines will have the criteria for assessment. I suppose start with application writing. I guess this is often regarded by artists as a chore, that it's an onerous exercise. It's functional rather than meaningful, and in a sense I do understand that. However, an application does give us a sense of the behind the scenes of a project. And I think maybe perhaps instead of looking at it as a means to an end to get funding, that it should be foregrounded as an essential part of the crucial thinking through of a project and the critical stages of research and the creative process. I guess earlier we touched off, power differentials, the ethical considerations that need to be included, but also how do your methods reflect a project. So I suppose in the application process, it's often this thinking through stage that allows applicants to look at the larger ecosystem that is around a project. perhaps it's partnerships, or maybe it's the other skills that you need to deliver this project, or perhaps there's services that you need to bring in. And I suppose it's, you know, if you're working with a vulnerable community, you know, is there a partner organization that is best fit to support you in that project, and offering that framework of support to both you and the community, for example. Or perhaps you need, if it's a production and you need lighting, if you don't have those skills, who needs to come in? So I think also for something like the AIC scheme, but also the Arts and Community Awards, is that the application in a way can be seen, or I suppose looked at like a memorandum of understanding between all parties involved. So no different than a memorandum of understanding with an organisation. That can't be rushed. You can't have grey areas. And also you can't leave things to be ironed out later. Iron out all expectations, because this is the beginning of laying out what you can and cannot do. I suppose often you find that an organisation or a community might have a different sense of what they thought the project is. So it's so important that it's ironed out at this stage, because if it's funded, and I suppose that system falls apart, what happens next? And I suppose a project most likely will not be funded if it doesn't consider the ethics around all those involved, which includes the artists and all the resourcing and into that needs to go into the process, the production, and also the final work. I think when communicating your collaborative practice, that I suppose it's important that you can describe your methodology, and this, you know, as how you go about working with people. My colleague Keelan would often call it like making seen the unseen. So I suppose this too speaks to the relational aspect of the work, so the relationships that get built. And I suppose, like, quite often there's many cups of teas and lots of conversations that happen to build meaningful relationships, and often this is the work that doesn't get seen. So I think it's important that we put value on the time and communicate this in the work as well. And I suppose why I'm highlighting this is because the process of engagement is often where the transformational part of a project happens, like the heart of the project, of the community, gets formed. And this is sometimes where a project starts to take on a life outside of the project, and often you as an artist ends up working longer term with a community beyond that project. So when we speak about the purpose of a project, and I suppose we could call this the why, you know, I suppose projects are often based on issues and themes that affect the community. And quite often it's really important that we understand, you know, why now? Why is this project important now? And what's the purpose, the meaning, or the use of this project to the artists and the community? And I suppose it really gives the panel a real good sense of, you know, why this project should be funded. So I'm also just want to touch off, you know, in terms of numbers, there's often a sense of the more people we engage with, the better. I think it's important to say we're not looking for large numbers of people passively engaging in a process or a project. That's not what we'd speak to when we advocate for collaborative practice, but I suppose we speak to meaningful collaboration that allows for depth of engagement and not breadth. So if your project's under 10 people or even 4 people, that's fine too. I suppose in order for a community to meaningfully engage and shape a project, you know, you need to ask yourself, is it feasible? You know, can I engage with 40 people? Possibly not, you're only one person. And perhaps that, you know, if there is a larger audience or a larger participatory element, then that's absolutely fine. But the core community needs to be a realistic size that is manageable for those individuals and also for yourself. And I suppose if your project is about public engagement and participation over collaboration, that's fine, but something like the Artists in the Community Scheme just wouldn't be the right fit for it. Okay, so I suppose ultimately what I'm trying to say is that, like, say, the above, I think it's really important for an artist to afford yourself the time to focus on your statement of practice. And I think it's worth focusing, I suppose it's worth doing this so that you can communicate your work clearly and simply. And I suppose this is how, you know, if a partner organization understands what you're doing and how you're doing it, it's much easier for them to come on board to support the project, but also it's much easier for a panel to give a sense of the work. Obviously, collaborative projects are committed to art and artistic outcomes, so we can't talk about process without the art. So the artistic projects formed and projects like this, like collaborative projects, are made and shaped with the community. And I suppose this needs to be evident in the storytelling within the application. So people often would ask me, how do I describe or articulate the artistic outputs? While there's, I know in a lot of applications, there's only a limited amount of numbers, so it can be difficult to fully portray this, but have a think about where else in the application can I evidence my practice? For example, your CV or previous work. I think it's important for people to really get a sense of that support material can often help the panel imagine the types of artistic outputs you're thinking about or you're describing, and also the potential. It shows the potential of your potential, but also your track record. And I think I suppose one thing, it's often that we see that support material is an afterthought when actually it's as critical. I think is also what's really important for everyone to consider when they're doing a project is, are you documenting the project? Because you should be allocating a bit of your budget to document your work. This is the traceability of your practice. So these are your future examples, but also this is the trace of this practice, because quite often this practice happens in a moment in time. Also, in terms of the work that you're submitting with your support material, be specific. Be specific as to why you're using something, as opposed, if you're showing something that's their individual arts practice, is this really going to help the panel understand your work? And also ensure that your CV is relevant to the type of award you're asking for. I'm going to touch off, and I know I'm really high in time here, but just touch off letters supports. Jenny, you mentioned them. I suppose these are really important because they really give clarity to the roles of partners and the other expertise you're bringing in. So if there's any in-kind support or any financial support, this also frames the feasibility and the ecosystem around the project. So the letters of support need to be relevant to the project, not necessarily reference letters. And also, if you're applying for a mentorship with something like the AIC scheme, is that you need to show that the mentor has agreed that they will mentor you, and so on and so forth. Jenny touched off the budget. I think once you do a budget, you won't be long realizing what you can and cannot do. Artists have to be paid. You can't work for free, and you can't do in-kind support. So I always encourage people to do budget early days. Also, in terms of like emerging artists, don't be put off by any of this, because a panel will look at the potential of your practice. And I think this is where you have to ask yourself, what do I need in order to step into this space? Or if I'm emerging or moving into collaborative practice, perhaps you might look at mentorship. So I think that's a really good avenue. And my final note on support material is just make it straightforward. No fancy font or backgrounds. I think people need to consider when writing an application as well, that it needs to be legible. Panelists often do have dyslexia too, so be simple in how you show the material. Not jarring colors. There's no need for it. And also, just don't waste your time making things look very fancy when you can actually just deliver a very simple package. And also just interrogate the language. Does the community understand what you're saying? Because we're not looking for art speak. So there's 2 deadlines with the AIC scheme. We've got March coming up. We'll be publishing the guidelines next week. And there's also September. I'm just checking there. Sheila, do I have time to do a case study? Or even Jenny?
Yeah, Jenny, I mean, yes, Jenny. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Thanks, Sonia.
No bother. So I have 3 case studies, but clearly I have an awful tendency to ramble. But anyway, I'm going to maybe just talk about one case study and then direct you to the case study pages. This is a recent project that was with the Freebirds Motorcycling Club and artist Bridget Mulligan. So there was 12 members from the cycling club who collaborated on this project. They were from County Louth. It was across different art forms. There was film, there was also archiving, and there was what they're called sculptural installation. The original aims of this project was for the project to involve the reuniting of this motorcycling club. They wanted, I suppose, to go through a process of co-creating a film to tell the story of the club. But the focus of the project was to look back, I suppose, at shared history, but also the significant loss of 3 of the club members due to road traffic accident. It was very, very, I suppose, intimate project. This project grew from an art making project to a memorial motorcycle run to a band being formed to the printing of T-shirts. So it really grew. So the main methods for collaboration that this artist used, she was doing bi-weekly workshops. So the group initially began their, I suppose, their process by looking back at old photographs in the archive that they had as various families gathered around this project. So they also started to record a lot of their meetings. And it was during this time that the group decided that a film would be the most useful way of giving insight into the biking culture, but while also addressing their experience of loss. It was also through these conversations that the idea of doing the memorials motorcycle began. So it became, I suppose, a shared objective for the whole group, but yet it was not necessarily an intention of the project. And I suppose in this project, you see where the artist and the community really started to really share their skills or their love for the project, but also the love of what was starting to get generated, and how they worked together to realize a lot of their visions. So it was also in these meetings that the group collectively looked at what type of questions that they'd be asking for the quest or for the film. So they all obviously wanted to unfold the biking culture in Ireland, but also they knew that they had to focus on some harder questions about their personal perspectives of loss. So they were really involved in carving those questions, but also the artist herself was a sister to some of the members in this group, and the other members would regard her as a little sister. I suppose that the motorcycling club would have operated as a family. Here's an old photo of them, and that's the most recent one of them all together. So they also engaged in activities, or they'd come together at weekends and they'd workshop different things like reed making out of motorcycle parts and different elements. So it was a really hands-on project. So obviously there was a lot more to this project, but some of the outputs, there was a film, and there was also an archival exhibition, and then there was, I suppose, alternative shrine sculptures, and there was also ceramic work. The film was, and I don't have a clip of it at the moment, but it was a 35-minute film, and they brought a filmmaker on board, Bruno Percuri, I'm nearly sure his name was. So Bridget and Bruno would have led out in that, I suppose, process with the group. But they also had an exhibition which showcased the artistic process that they'd engaged with, a lot of the documentary photography from the processes, but also the different sculptures that were created with the group, including the group created an archival wall, and they also curated the images that will go on it, and there was also some other ceramic work that they did with another artist called Martina, and that was something that was co-designed with the men. Other things that came out of this project, which came to life after or during and after the project, was that they decided that they'd also create a publication. So they looked for funding elsewhere to create this publication. But also in between this project, and I suppose this is where a whole community got activated by this project, another local artist got involved and helped the group update the club logo. And that same logo went on to be part of a new t-shirt design. So there was a t-shirt printing run. Then there was also someone else got involved in designing posters and cataloguing some of the project work. There was also, I suppose, during this film, there was the musical score. So some of the members were involved in doing the musical score for the film, but also 5 members of the group set up a band called Lazarus Brothers, and they went on to play at different events that were associated with the project. I probably don't have time to go into any other case studies, but we have these up on our website. There's a really great case study on John Conway's work, A New Normal, where he worked with breast cancer survivors. It's a really phenomenal project that I'd really recommend people look at. And there's also a project that I was going to just touch off. It's a really wonderful project called Boxed, which was a collaborative film with filmmaker Gito Sebastian, and his group were known as Neuron, and they were a group of Indo-Irish atheists. So both of them are phenomenal projects, and I'd highly recommend people go and read them. But also we will be doing an information session in a couple of weeks where we will have an artist join us, and when the artists will speak to their practice in more depth, so we'll get a better sense of the artist and the community scheme. So I'm like, oh, take a deep breath. So that's it.
Great, Áine, thanks so much. And I know we had a question in the chat, but just to clarify again, so we invited Áine along to talk about the types of project that are similar to ones that can be achieved under our scheme. And so she's just giving me a flavour there of what they might look like. A lot of what she said about how to draw together the application is all similar for this process. So, but as well, Áine has just highlighted there that their own schemes that she talked about are opening up. So if you're imagining a project which has larger ambition, or you know, you feel is more relevant to that application process, you can, once it opens in March, apply for that as well, and register for Áine to see the specific sessions around that.